So typically when I read a cozy murder mystery series, I enjoy ones that are very lighthearted and humorous. This book was not heavy on the humor. This book dealt with some heavier topics, I guess, or just the tone of it was more serious. So we have our main character, and she had a friendship with her neighbor. Neighbor ends up murdered, and there are quite a lot of people who could be the potential murderer. And it was fine. It was an okay read. I wouldn't say that I loved it. I felt like some of the characters were a little bit vanilla, I guess. I mean, I hate to come across harsh. It just didn't work for me. I think other people would really love this. I'd probably still continue with the series just because I really love the cozy setting of this. It's a very beautiful place. And now that we know some of the other secondary characters, maybe there'll be improvements on the next one. But I just felt that the motives that most of the characters had for committing the murder were very similar. I wasn't that blown away by the ending of it because most of them all had similar motives anyway. One of the twists in it caught me a little off guard, and there wasn't enough build-up around that. So it felt surprising, but I like when plot twists feel surprising and also like, oh, I should have seen that coming, but I didn't feel like there were any hints or clues to that. Maybe I just missed them, but I didn't really see them. And I don't know. I really hate to say it because she's a good writer. The writing style was fine. It just was a little boring to me, if I have to be honest. So I would give this a 3-star. I think it's great as a first book. I would still continue with the series and just see where it goes. Other people might really enjoy this one. It's really probably just a me thing that it didn't work for, only because, like I said, I'm very particular about my cozy murder mysteries. I really enjoy them to be more funny and just a little bit wacky and have some strange characters in it. And I didn't really get that in this book. But still a fine read. I'd still recommend people check it out because I didn't find anything problematic about the book. So you might really enjoy this book. So if you like cozy murder mysteries and you like really cute settings and you like family drama, then you would probably enjoy this book. And this next book that I'm about to talk about, I have been looking forward to talking about this book so much. This was my favorite book of the month. Total 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. And this is what has solidified Rachel Harrison as an all-time favorite author and why I will continue to read anything that she writes. So this is much more cozy than The Return and Such Sharp Teeth. This is definitely what I would label as cozy horror. So there are pockets of horrific elements on there, but I felt it was much more cozy than anything else. So in this book, we have our main character, Annie, and she has just broken up with her long-term boyfriend who she thought that she would marry and spend the rest of her life with. And she ends up moving to a place in upstate New York. And it's such a cozy location. She is a teacher and she's teaching high school. I can relate to because I teach on a high school level as well. And I felt that the scenes that took place in her classes were just very relatable on some level. I really love those scenes. But I liked just her going about her everyday life and stopping at the same coffee shop every day and her meeting this friend. And this friend is very mysterious. So this book deals a lot more with coming to terms with your own self and growing from a place of being a people pleaser or someone who doesn't really, they think they know what they want, but they're not really sure. And they're just kind of coming into their own. That's what I feel like Annie does in this book. And it's with the help of her friend, but there's mysterious elements about this friend. And throughout the book, you're not really sure, is this person a true friend or is this person actually dangerous and could cause Annie some harm? So that goes on through the whole book, and that really kept me turning the pages as well. I really loved just the setting is just done so well, and the writing style is perfect, and all I have to say is Ralph. Ralph makes this book. If you know, you know. And if you don't know about Ralph, you need to read this book and find out about Ralph. I don't want to say much more about it because I feel like I could wax poetic about this book for a long time. You just go out and read this book if you haven't read it. It's so sweet. It's perfect. And with fall coming up, this is a perfect fall read. So I love this book so much. That's all I can say. Just read it. The next book I read was a horror book by Jennifer Thorne called Diavola. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's Italian. And I really enjoyed this horror book a lot. I'm trying to compare it to Rachel Harrison. I feel like Rachel Harrison has a little bit more humor in her books than Jennifer Thorne does. But I feel like the character of Rory in this book kind of reminds me of some of these other characters in Rachel Harrison's books, maybe even in Such Sharp Teeth. So I really enjoyed this book a lot. It was great. The pacing was excellent. It had just the right amount of horror for me. And the setting was great. So we have this villa in Italy, and we have this family that's coming together, a big extended family, to vacation together. And you think that would be really sweet and wonderful, and maybe that this is just a haunted villa and that's all there is to it. No, because this is the worst family ever. This is one of the worst families ever. In fact, the reason why this is not a 5-star for me, and I hate to give a spoiler, but most of the family lives. We'll just say that. And I was kind of rooting for some bad things to happen to some of these characters because they were just so awful to our main character. And what I really liked about this book is that even though I'm rooting for this main character, sometimes we'd find out things about this character and I'd be like, am I supposed to like this character? And it's not because of what she did that's a problem. It's how she comes across when she's talking about things that she's done, and just the vibe that she gives off about it. But I just could not believe her siblings, her parents. I don't really understand what their deal was, and it was just very strange. But I couldn't stop reading it. I just really couldn't stop reading it. And it was just very mysterious. We do have this haunted villa. There's strange things going on. There's the mystery of this ghost or this entity and what it has the power to do. So we have all those traditional horror elements in it. And then there are some twists along the way. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't a 5-star for me, but definitely probably a 4 or 4.5. It was a fun read. It was an exciting read. I think it had a lot to say as well about family dynamics, about how we spend our time as well, because it was really interesting to see Rory develop as a character a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't say it was like a full-on big leap, but it was subtle enough and there was some growth at the end. But what I loved about it was just the horror elements, the pacing, the fact that we have this really unlikable family. We've got some mystery in there. It was well done. I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about the next book I read by Jennifer Thorne, which was her first book, Loot. I thought I would love this book because I loved Diavola so much, and I was like, I love the writing style, so I was like, I'm gonna love Loot, because Loot was compared to Wicker Man meets Final Destination on the back of the book, but I had heard another booktuber compare it to Midsommar, which was a movie that I really enjoyed, and based on the blurb, I was like, oh, this sounds really cool, because we have this secluded community, there's this mystery around it, that every 7 years, on the 7th month, there are 7 deaths on this day. It's called The Day. And it didn't work for me at all. And it might work for other people. In fact, this is the opposite of what I've been saying throughout most of this video. I enjoy the ending the most, but the ride along the way was so slow. The pacing was not great to me. I felt that there was just a lot of talking and a lot of reflecting, with too much talking and too much reflecting, and it was just kind of stretched out. And I felt that there could have been darker horror in it. It wasn't as scary as Diavola, and that was a little bit disappointing as well. I just felt like the premise was so promising, and instead it felt a little bit more like a love story trying to be scary. And it wasn't very scary. It was very atmospheric, I would say. The writing style did develop this atmosphere and this tone, but I didn't really enjoy the main character either. I just really didn't. I felt that she was very vanilla in a lot of ways. I questioned a lot of her choices. It would hint to some of her backstory, but it didn't go that far in depth into her backstory, and it just had me questioning so much. But what it goes to show, though, is that even though I didn't really, Loot was fine. It was an okay book. It wasn't the worst thing I ever read. But compared to her next book, Diavola, it was a letdown. But it goes to show how writers can improve over time, because I would still continue to read more books by this author, because even though I didn't like the first one, her second book was great, and I feel like she's probably going to make her third book even better. I still feel like a lot of people would enjoy this book. I just didn't like how slow it was. I didn't like the main character all that much. I didn't really enjoy the romance elements to it, if we can even say that. I liked the commentary on motherhood, but I actually felt she could have gone even further with that. I would have liked to have seen that explored a little bit more in depth. The same thing with Fate versus Free Will. I think she would weave in some of that commentary, but it was just far and few in between, versus I felt she was a lot stronger in her commentary on themes in Diavola. But I do feel like if you like slower paced books, if you like atmospheric books, if you like books that are a slow burn, that are not as scary, you'd probably enjoy this book. I think there's a lot of people that would still really enjoy this. I just prefer my books to be a lot faster paced. I like my characters to be a little bit more complex. I don't necessarily need a romance in my horror books unless they're like really well done or they are really tied into the plot. So I wish I could have loved this one. I wish I had better things to say about it. I feel really bad that the book didn't work for me, but I do feel like other people might find this book totally fine. So I gave it a 3. This is probably the only book that I gave a 3, and that's like the lowest rating that I have. So this is the book that I probably liked the least this month. But don't let that deter you from reading this book. I definitely recommend Jennifer Thorne as an author, and I can't wait to see what she does next. And the last 2 books on my list are both quintessential cozy murder mystery stories. So the first one is Get Away with Murder by Diane Kelly, and I really enjoyed this book. It was very cute, and it was very funny and humorous, and I like how she kind of played around with some of the tropes in this cozy murder mystery, and I can't wait to read the other ones in the series. So I believe I gave this one probably a 4.5. I didn't love the ending. That didn't quite work for me, but the rest of it I really did enjoy. So in this book, our main character is newly divorced, getting a new lease on life. Her sons are off in college now, so she decides to go to the mountains of North Carolina and open up an inn that has been abandoned. And she meets some friends in the community. There's a love interest in this book, and I thought that was really fun the way that played out. I also liked the relationship that she had with the detective in this book, because sometimes I feel like in cozy murder mysteries we see too much of a detective who's constantly trying to tell the main characters to stop their sleuthing, to keep their nose out of the whole situation, but we don't get that in this book. And in fact, because the murder takes place at her inn, she is very invested in solving this, obviously. And the way it works is her first visitors are all coming up from a yoga retreat. So all of the people know each other, but she doesn't know any of them. And the yoga instructor, and this isn't a spoiler, it's on the back of the book, the main yoga instructor who runs the studio is the person that's killed. And she's like this horrible person. So then you get to know all of the people she was on the retreat with and what her relationship was with all of them and figure out who the murderer was. I don't want to say too much about it because obviously I don't want to spoil the ending. I would just say, for me, it just didn't work. But I'm still going to read the rest of her books. I enjoyed the humor in it. I enjoyed the setting of it. I enjoyed the main characters in it and the secondary characters. So I can't wait to see what the other ones are like. So definitely check it out if you like a cozy murder mystery that's set at an inn and has humor in it. This one fits the bill. And last but not least, we have A Very Woodsy Murder by Ellen Byron. This book just came out this month, and I really enjoyed it. I definitely recommend listening to this one on audio, like I did. It was fun. This is exactly the kind of cozy murder mystery story that I like because it's zany, it's wacky, it's humorous, it doesn't take itself seriously at all. The main characters are kind of silly, but Dee Stern, our main character, is very smart, even though she can be a little silly at times. The other secondary characters, they are characters, we'll just say that. So it's just, I really enjoyed her characterization and the way she kind of ties different elements up with them. I wouldn't say they're complex characters, but they're really fun. And the mystery element in this one was interesting because main character Dee Stearns, she is fed up with Hollywood. She was a sitcom writer. Things aren't going well in her career, but she discovers this motel in this area in California that's near a national park, and she falls in love with it, and she convinces her first ex-husband, because she's twice divorced, but he's also her best friend, to go in on this venture together. So they know nothing about running an inn. They know nothing about living in the woods where there's bears. And it's just wacky. But a person from her past is her first guest at the inn. And he is murdered at that inn. So obviously she needs to help solve it if she wants to continue running this inn and not have people just cancel when they find out it's a murder inn. But the way that goes is she doesn't really know anyone in the community. She's also trying to explore that. It ends up we kind of meet people one at a time, and she's just kind of interviewing people and sleuthing people. I didn't necessarily like that style of investigation compared to Get Away with Murder, where the way that's introduced is before the person is killed. We've already met a lot of the suspects, and we've seen her interaction with these suspects, and then we get into the investigation. So we know a little bit and can already kind of suss out some of the potential motives. But in this case, Michael is murdered, and she doesn't know anyone yet, and we haven't seen him interact with any of those other characters. And I think this is my criticism of Murder on Devil's Pond, because we only met a couple of the main character suspects, but then she has to go on and interview these other people that we hadn't met. And I definitely enjoy the ones where you see the scenario play out first and get to know a lot of the suspects ahead of time. That just, I don't know, I feel more invested in solving the mystery than, oh, this person dies on your property and now you have to talk to all these different people and get to know them along the way. It just feels very step by step. However, what this book did a great job on is adding in some plot twists throughout. So that was really fun. Some of them I was like, okay, that's a little over the top, but because this book does not take itself seriously at all and the characters are zany to begin with, it's not a leap. You're not like, rolling your eyes. It's what you would expect. So I felt like this book was a lot of fun. It's so lighthearted, it's silly. I can't wait to read more in this series, so I gave this one a 4.5. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know in the comments below what you thought about these books. Would you want to read them? Which ones sound most interesting to you? Have you read any of these before? If so, what did you think about them? And I will see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.